So thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Jason Bohr, I'm the Executive Director of the Secure Technology Alliance, and we'll be moderating this session this morning. Today we'll be focused on the topic of cybersecurity, and more specifically, the recent U.S. executive order that was handed down by the White House back in May, outlining new requirements related to cybersecurity. Obviously, it's a very relevant topic that touches almost every aspect of business today, both here in the States and across the globe. We'll be partnering with two leading firms in this space, both Utimaco and HP Enterprise, we've put together a ton of great content for the next hour and look forward to providing some additional insights to the executive order and outlining best practices as you begin to think about how this executive order might affect your own individual business. As you can see the agenda, if you want to go ahead and move forward there, thank you, Manish, you can see the agenda outlined on the screen. I will do brief introductions, both of our panelists, and then we'll jump into the meat of the presentation with an overview of the federal mandate, some insight related to where we stand today on best practices related to data encryption and key management. And then we also provide roughly 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session for question and answer. I do want to point out that there is a Q&A box on the WebEx platform, and I would encourage anyone with a question to please type the question into the QA box, and we'll be sure to get it addressed by the panelists at the end of the presentation. As we want this to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to jump in there. First, a few words about the hosting organization. As many of you know, the Secure Technology Alliance is a not-for-profit, multi-industry organization that's focused on stimulating the understanding, adoption, and widespread application of secure solutions. You can see some of the key industries where we participate there on the right, including access control, authentication, identity management, Internet of Things, mobile, payment space, and key vertical markets like transportation. Our main focus is to bring together key stakeholders in these markets to help promote secure technologies, provide a forum for interactive discussion, and create educational and training certifications for our members. If you'd like to learn more about the organization or considering joining, please feel free to reach out to myself or Deb Farrell. You can reach both of us through the Secure Technology Alliance website. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and move on and introduce the panelists, as we do have two distinguished panelists today. First, we have Manish Upasani, who is the product manager for Utimaco. Manish has been in the cybersecurity and secure technology space for over 15 years, with 10 of those years dedicated to Utimaco. You can see he's been active in the space and well-credentialed through his participation in many industry-related certifications. He's also been a strong supporter of the Alliance, and we appreciate his support. So welcome, Manish. In addition, we also have Mark Azadpour joining us this morning from Houston, Texas. Mark is the Workload Security Product Manager at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Mark has 20+ years of experience in the space, focused on security from an end-user perspective, technologies focused around zero trust, CPU-assisted security products, data at rest, data in motion, and ISV ecosystem execution. He is PMP certified and also has a security clearance with the U.S. government. So welcome, Mark. And with that, with the introductions done, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, to Manish, to go ahead and kick us off.
Good morning, everyone. Before we get into, let me quickly introduce Utimaco. Utimaco is all about trust. We create trust in the information security domain, be it the payments, be it the general purpose world. What we specialize into is HSMs, the hardware security modules, and key management. With the HSMs, with the key management, what we provide is the peace of mind, be it typical payment transactions or protecting your assets when it comes to key management, where you can protect all of your crown jewels and keep them safe. The solutions that Utimaco provides allow our customers to enjoy the highest level of security while remaining compliant with various industry regulations. Mark, you still there with us?
Yep. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure joining Manish and Utimaco team to briefly talk through the solution we are offering today. But HBE, our mission is to advance the way people live and work. And for over 80 years, we have basically imagined and fulfilled engineering challenges that has faced us. And as we, go through the transition with the technology, we are becoming an edge-centric, cloud-enabled, and data-driven to, address the challenges we have today and to move forward. Next slide, please. Okay, as you know, cybersecurity attacks have, grown quite a bit. I mean, we all have seen the infrastructure attacks that has happened in the U.S. lately, as well as, for instance, cases of stealing court records and, ransomware and all the different attacks that you have seen in the headline. A few are mentioned in here, for instance, with the Microsoft attack. Basically, 250,000 servers were impacted, and then the CNA Financial essentially paid $40 million ransom to the rogue entities to be able to continue operation. So this is obviously a change in the scenery, and a lot of new actors, rogue actors, as well as state-sponsored actors that are entering this arena for one way or another to impact, operation, disrupt operations, and to basically, in case of, ransomware to, basically collect money. And this is the new arena. Essentially, data has become the new global currency, and therefore all the bad players and the ones that used to go rob the banks are really focusing on this arena and doing a lot of damage or attempt to cause harm or disrupt operations. So needless to say, this is a very sensitive area, and it's growing fast. And at the rate that the cyber attacks are growing, the spending in the cyber security arena is not catching up. So obviously the two lines are diverging. And the solution that we are working with Utimaco today, I'm glad to say, is addressing exactly the situation. How do you protect your data and avoid a need to basically address, hopefully, this the day that your data is compromised and you have to have some backup plan to either recover or pay the ransom. Anything you want to add, Manish?
No, I think you said it right. Certainly, information security and data leak is something that is causing a problem to everybody. And it's not just about the corporates, it's also hitting the government entities as well. And as a result, the US government's reaction to it is they came up with an executive order. And the order is essentially reliant on improving the nation's cybersecurity. They gave 180 days of this order to the agencies to implement multi-factor. I mean, there is a whole lot of things in there. Multi-factor authentication. They talk about data at rest. They talk about data in transit. They talk about protecting all the data that federal agencies own, and the federal agencies have to abide by this executive order as soon as possible. And when it comes to these executive orders, the way I see it is not just about that it is applicable to the federal agencies, but also to the other organizations that actually do business with the federal government. If you are doing business with the federal government, with all of these agencies, it will also be expected from you to follow, if not everything, most of the regulations, most of the rules that have been outlined in this executive order. Because when you do business with someone, when you partner with someone, it is not just about your information, or it's not just about the partner's information. Together, you form an organization, an alliance, and then the data is now shared across the boundaries. The data leaves your boundaries. And that's when it's not just about that the executive order will be applicable to these agencies, but also flow across the borders. And also on top of that, when we talk about information security in general, it impacts every other business that we talk about. It doesn't matter if you are a federal agency, everybody has got data. And as you correctly said, Mark, data is becoming the new currency. And or the way I say it is data is the new oil, and everybody wants that. Everybody wants to have more data for analytics, and also when we look at it from an adversary ecosystem perspective, they also are interested in that data. And if that data leaves, or if that data falls in wrong hands, there are quite a few things that can go wrong. For example, you can get some really bad press, and social media, which is pretty active these days, you can get your also impacted with the regulatory bodies that you must follow. For example, we have a PCI for all those organizations who fall into the payment card industry, or HIPAA for the healthcare providers, the SOX, FIPS, and many others who has got some hefty fines if there is a data leak, or if it is identified that you were not taking enough care to safeguard your ecosystem. So again, it is obviously the government is taking its own actions and making sure that people are following, the agencies are following the regulations that they have outlined. But security is something that is on everybody's mind, and it affects everybody. One more thing that I would like to add here is with the new world that we are living in, COVID, everybody's working from home. And then now there is also security further expands, or the company networks further expand to your home Wi-Fi or wireless routers, to your own PCs, which you have back home, because everybody is now home, and you connect to your offices, to your enterprise networks from your home network. So if there is a compromise, if there is a problem with your home network, it can potentially jeopardize your corporate networks as well. So end of the day, there is no boundary what we are doing these days. Everything flows from where it starts all the way down to your home, all the way down to who you do business with, and so on. And when we see how does this cybersecurity executive order impact you, or how it is typically implemented, or how you should implement within your organization, what I would like to take you through a quick journey on how an adversary ecosystem looks alike. What does that mean? When we typically see an attack, what is the DNA, or what is the flow of a typical attack? And the way it starts is obviously it starts with a research, with a malicious entity trying to find out what is the most lucrative entity out there, who, if I attack, if I try to infiltrate, what is the best target for me? What is the easiest target for me? It always starts with the research phase. Typically, how do we address that phase? How do we make sure that we are protected against that phase? Is educating our users not to give out the data by implementing a lot of different access control models. One of that is a mandatory access control model where we share things that is absolutely on a need to know basis by employing some counterintelligence against the research phase. And then the adversary ecosystem moves further with infiltration. This is where they try to gain access after they have identified that, okay, this asset looks pretty lucrative and easy to get access into. Maybe there are certain vulnerabilities, maybe the information security is not handled properly, they are using weak passwords, and so on. That's when they try to get into the network. And this is where you employ by stopping this access. There are quite a few things that we use today. We have firewalls, we have IDS systems, we have IPS systems, and so on, that essentially detect and stop this infiltration. But in spite of all of that, we know that things do get ugly, and the attackers are now in your network. This is, once the attacker is in a network, the very next thing that they're going to do is they're going to discover, what do you have there? Where are the crown jewels? Where are the keys if you have some kind of encryption implemented, or if you have some kind of a databases which stores the credit card information, or the PII, as we call it, personally identifiable information, date of birth, people's social, and so on. So all of that information is what they try to discover within the ecosystem, and that happens within the discovery phase. Again, this is where the way we can stop it is to find and remove that access. If we can detect and remove that access in time, that is where it will help us to stop it before it goes way further into the ecosystem. And the moment these guys actually find where your data lives, that's the time when they try to capture the data. And the moment they capture this data, they simply move on and try to get that data out. And what we are trying to do, or the philosophy that we follow along with HP, is to capture them, to protect our data right there when they're trying to capture it, by securing the important assets, so that even if those assets fall in the wrong hands and exfiltration happens, it will be worthless for them. So that's basically the philosophy that we are trying to follow here. And obviously, the process further continues with exfiltration, where they try to now get out the data, get out of the network by maintaining access typically, and everything ends with monetization. And this is a typical adversary ecosystem. What we are trying to do is we are trying to disrupt that adversary ecosystem along with HP, where we at Utimaco try to secure the data using encryption that lives throughout the ecosystem. Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Manish. So, to complement securing the data, basically, the solution or the hardware platform that we advocate using with Utimaco is HPE's servers, and based on independent studies, that's been dubbed as the most secure industry standard server portfolio. And basically, we have this initiative called 360-degree view, which means for the whole life cycle of the parts and a component of a server, from when it's basically going to the manufacturing and going through the supply chain, it secures, and it stays secure during operation, and it concludes at the end of its life by decommissioning and providing tools and safeguards so that you can basically dispose of the server or repurpose the server without any concerns about the data. Back to you, Manish.
Right, and wherever now HP stores the data, I mean, there is a whole lot of places where they do, and there is also a typical data at rest ecosystem that we will look into, but it doesn't really matter where you store your data. It doesn't matter where the data lives. Utimaco comes with its key management solutions, with its hardware security modules, which creates the trust, the root of trust for your enterprise, and becomes your trusted security partner. On that note, Jason, do we have any questions before we move into the presentation?
Thank you, man. So first question is, will anyone lose their existing data if they enable encryption in their infrastructure?
Well, that's an interesting question. Unfortunately, there is no one size fits all, but typically those, I would say, infrastructures or data at rest solutions that are designed thoughtfully doesn't require you to lose your data or to re-encrypt your data by losing it or by moving it out. Most of the implementations today do allow you to encrypt that data in place by employing different methods where they pick up a block of data, move it to the encryption controller, encrypt it, and move it back into your storage, and so on. So it totally depends. And but irrespective, when we talk about encryption, the very first thing that comes to my mind is key management, and along with a right key management solution, you can certainly make it happen and encrypt the data in such a way where you don't have to lose it. You can always re-encrypt the data in place.
Very good. Thank you for that. One additional question too is what
Please.
encryption algorithms are typically employed to protect their data and make them compliant?
So the federal ecosystem typically mandates you to have AES 256-bit encryption. That is the industry standard for all the data at rest type of situations. And then when we talk about data in motion, there are different things like we have today, ECC, we have RSA, and a lot of other algorithms. But when we talk about data at rest, when we talk about protecting the data while it resides on your hard drives, be it your laptops, be it your servers, doesn't matter where the data lives, it is typically AES 256-bit encryption.
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So maybe we will park the rest of the questions at the end of the webinar, and we can continue with the presentation. What I would like to talk about now is a quick data at rest ecosystem. When we talk about our data, it lives everywhere on our infrastructure. We start with the physical storage where actually the data physically lives. But and when we talk about physical storage, it could be your servers, it could be your storage, it could be a sandbox, it could be a NAS, it could be as simple as your thumb drives, and so on. So that's all about your physical storage. Going one layer up, nobody uses bare metal servers these days. Everybody tries to virtualize. Everybody tries to get the maximum from the infrastructure that they have deployed. So everybody does a virtualization. And the moment we go that one layer up, when we talk about virtual storage, now your hard drives, the virtual hard drives, I mean, are nothing but a file. All right. And then on top of that virtual storage, now we have operating systems, the biggest operating systems that we have. And now your data lives out there again in the form of either files and folders or in the database. So that's a typical data at rest ecosystem that we see here. And when we talk about this data at rest ecosystem, there are different attacks that needs to be considered, that needs to be kept in mind when we store this data. And at each layer, at each level, there are different attack vectors. There can be different entities that will be able to have a potential threat to that data wherever it lives through the ecosystem. For example, when we talk about physical storage, it is about the insiders, typically where the data can fall in wrong hands. It could be employees where the data can fall in wrong hands, or physical attacks, or when you're trying to move data, let's say from one data center to another data center, when we talk about data center. migrations. So when we talk about offsite backups, so there are quite a few places where things can go wrong when we talk about the bare metal servers. When we take one step up, or maybe Mark, you want to add more on this?
No, I mean, to reemphasize your point, Manish, this solution provides a holistic approach to securing data at rest. So, there are different, schemas to basically do per drive encryption or subsystem encryption. With Utimaco deployed, you do the encryption at the, say, controller side of a storage subsystem. Therefore, everything downstream from it is by de facto is secure. Not only that, but the key management side of it, which is another hurdle that Manish is going to talk to later on, that's also taken care of.
Right. So when we protect that data at the physical storage, the next level, as I talk about, is virtual storage. Again, at this level, it's all about a file. And now there are different attack vectors. There are different attacks that can happen here is something that can be compromised at the hypervisor level. Now, one thing to consider, one thing to know here is even though your physical data is encrypted, it doesn't really mean a thing when you look at it, when you come at it from a different layer, which is now you're coming in at a hypervisor level. The data at rest is encrypted. Your physical hard drives are encrypted, but when you log in from a hypervisor perspective, the data is there for you to read and is available for you. The encryption is not going to, that encryption at that layer is not going to protect you against these attack vectors. They come at a different layer. It could be a VMware, it could be your virtualization admin, a disgruntled employee, or it could be also, as I said, hypervisor level attacks. Going one level up, now we have got guest operating systems. Again, now there are different set of people who has got access to this data. This is where now your application lives. This is where you need to worry about the vulnerabilities that shows up at the operating system level. This is something that happens to be another lucrative asset more than the virtual storage, where because every day, I mean, we all know Patch Tuesdays and nobody likes those, but still that is something that is a truth that we have to go through every month. And there are quite a few things that happens at the operating system level. It is a complex piece of software. So we have our operating system admin, we have our application level admins who come in at this stage. And this is also where the logical attacks comes into the picture. We do have our access control mechanisms and so on, but still there are quite a few people who have got access to this. A simple example of that could be an IT admin as well. At this level, once we have operating system, now where does the data actually live? The data lives in, let's say, databases or as a file and folder. But when we talk about database, we are talking about attacks like SQL injection, unsecured database dumps, or a database admin who has got unrestricted access to everything that we have at the database level. Now, it is important to protect your assets at this level because irrespective of what you have done at all of the levels below that, nothing of that will be able to stop you against, let's say, a SQL injection or a vulnerability that you had in your application or a database admin, as I said. And going one level up, when we talk about files and folders. And this is, again, something similar to what we talked about in the database, is when we look at it at a file and folder level, what we see is, again, this is where the misuse happens when the files actually leave your ecosystem. Like, for example, a user is simply trying to copy a file on a USB, or when the file is emailed to somebody, and so on. Or when we talk about a backup, like, okay, I worked on a very important file a whole day, and I don't want to keep that file only on my laptop. Let me go ahead and copy that file on a USB drive. Now what happened? That file become mobile. That file can fall in the wrong hands and things can go sideways. So essentially, coming back home, there are multiple layers where the data is stored, and at every single layer, there are different attack vectors, and it is important that we protect our data at all of these different layers. And when we talk about all of these different layers, end of the day, the data lives on the hardware. And this is where even the hardware-based security of your entire ecosystem, end to end, comes into the picture. Mark, you want to add more on that?
Sure. Yeah, exactly to that. So if so far we've been kind of focusing on the software stack and how do we protect data, but another critical component of this end-to-end security is the hardware side of things. So this slide talks to that. As you can see, basically this is like a flip chart that you can always refer to. And the column to your right is the type of attack or attempt to attack your infrastructure. And the middle column talks about how do we mitigate or address that type of attack from the hardware stack, which, on the top of it sits the OS platform and application, which Manish has gracefully detailed. And then the left-hand column talks about the solutions we offer or the, language or the nomenclature we use to talk to that. So, starting from the bottom, from the HPE protection layer, we talk about secure supply chain. So what does that do for you? For instance, if there is compromised ICs or integrated circuits or other hardware-based items that potentially got tapped into the supply chain and swapped the chip itself, we assure that's not going to happen from the supply perspective. Then we have our own ILO infrastructure, which is basically on a separate chip with a burned-in OS that comes on. And we have a product called Silicon Root of Trust. That guy essentially ensures that all your what we call options within the servers are kosher, and they are the one that basically got shipped from your manufacturing site. And as a part of that, we also do processor attestation to make sure this processor didn't get swapped. And then when you bring your BIOS and UEFI firmware, again, that attestation continues at boot up and at a regular periodic frame that you can set that up to ensure as the server is being used, A, we have the physical lock that you can add to the server, but B, also nobody even from the trusted personnel have come and swapped something in your server. And finally, if we find a detected point of failure, we have TPM and firmware rollback protection. So just like the VMs, you have a snapshot or a point that you save and you can restore, same idea here. You can go back to a saved point in your operation and continue operating till you mitigate the compromised system. So back to you, Manish, on the software side, I think.
Sure, absolutely. So what I see here is I tried to define quite a few different layers into the data at rest ecosystem, but it goes way beyond that when we look at supply chain, which has been one of the biggest problems for everybody around, because that's where multiple hands touches the whole asset that we are trying to create. When we talk about, let's say, a server, supply chain becomes, I don't know, maybe millions of components coming all together on making the motherboards and so on. And a small chip, a small malformed chip can cause devastation, can make you lose your data. And all of these things essentially form a layer of security where we are trying to eliminate any points of attacks, irrespective where they happens, by establishing trust right from the beginning, right from the design to delivering it to the customer, and finally making the customer to use the things in the right fashion. But we have been talking about encryption all along. Encryption is a proven method that protects your assets. Doesn't matter where they live today. When we talk about encryption, doesn't matter what you use, right from your thumb drives to your hard drives to your laptops to the enterprise assets, servers, storage, backup ecosystem, and so on. Encryption is everywhere. And when I personally look at encryption, I see that yes, absolutely, encryption is the way how I can protect my assets from falling in wrong hands. But there are, and it is also easy to implement as well with such a wide availability of encryption controllers, encryption providers. The moment I hear that word encryption, now, the very next thing that comes to my mind is how am I protecting my keys? What happens to my keys? Sure, I have encrypted my data. I have encrypted my thumb drive. I have encrypted my hard drives, my laptop, and everything else. But when we see encryption, everything boils down to the keys. And how am I protecting my keys? What happens to my keys? Am I going to get access to my keys when I actually need it? Am I going to what if this key falls in wrong hands? What if somebody else gets hold of the key? What if there is a social engineering that tries to, get hold of the keys? Or another aspect, when we look at it from an enterprise perspective, is there is also compliance that I need to prove whenever my auditors show up. And when they say that, okay, who has access to your keys? Who has accessed it in last, 6 months? Do you have an audit trail of all of these things? Because see, when we talk about this key, you have maybe terabytes or even petabytes of data. Essentially, that all that data is encrypted with one key. When I talked about AES 256 AES encryption, the key size is typically 128 bits to 256 bits. And now it is a really small, if you look at actually a key, it is really a small string of characters, or a really small string that needs to be protected. And now you need to make sure that it is protected right, because the moment you lose those 256 bits, you are essentially losing your data. If that 256 bit falls in the wrong hands, you're as well as giving access to the data. And a lot of people live under an illusion that the infrastructure that actually does the encryption also manage the keys. It is as good as locking your main drawer and hiding the key below the doormat. Somebody someday will find it. And when that happens, your locking of the door is not going to make any difference, is not going to make any sense. And that is exactly where a key manager, an asset that actually protects your keys. When I look at key manager, there are like typically 5 things that comes to my picture, that comes to my mind. But before I get into that, I would like to quickly give you an analogy on how we typically do key management. When we talk about key management, it is about, think of it like passwords. Typical password manager, I suppose everybody uses a password manager. And there are 2 ways how you can manage your passwords. One way is I use one password for every single thing that I have. Like, let's say I use Twitter, I use Facebook, I use my Google accounts and even my corporate accounts. And what I do is I use that one password, and I protect everything using that one password. It works perfectly well, no problem. And I don't have to remember multiple passwords. But imagine when there was a potential password leak on Facebook. What happened there is like all of those passwords were public. And as a result, everything else that I have protected using that password is now at stake is now compromised. The other way of how I can manage it is to have a unique password for everything that I have. I might end up with 100 passwords, and it is practically impossible to remember those 100 passwords. And that's where we go to a password manager. And that's exactly what a key manager is. The best practices within the information security ecosystem states that you should not ever reuse a key. And that's also obviously true with your password as well. So if you're not supposed to reuse a key, think of it as an enterprise ecosystem, or even when we look at it from the federal agencies, all of these people have hundreds and thousands of servers, hundreds and thousands of assets that they want to protect, and that results into creating hundreds and thousands of keys. So you want, when you talk about a key manager, you want to make sure that you hand over those keys to the most lucrative, to the most protected asset. So the security of this asset becomes very important to whom you give your crown jewels to. It's make sure that it meets the different NIST standards. It validates to different FIPS levels and so on. You also need to make sure that it is available throughout the ecosystem, making sure that there is no single point of failure. You also want to make sure that it is manageable. You don't want to employ a new team of people to manage this key manager that you're talking about. Another important thing is interoperable. You don't want to have a different key manager for different things, like you have with your password manager. You don't want to use a different password manager for your browser A versus a browser B. Versus what you would like to have is to have a plugin for both the browsers where the password is stored centrally, and then it gives you, whether you use Safari or you use Chrome, doesn't really matter. And scalable obviously is taken. You want to make sure that when you scale, the key manager that you're talking about also scales with you. And now that we were talking about those integrations, it is really easy to see that the key managers are something that plays a very important role when we talk about dual access controls, when we talk about split knowledge, when we talk about audits and so on. It should have integrations with the SIM solutions, typical management console with authentication and authorization that flows in through your centralized directory services. And then finally integrates with everything that you have in your ecosystem, starting from servers to your storage, to your cloud ecosystem, if it is big data or mission critical servers like HP nonstop or mainframes and so on, or expands further into third-party applications, your enterprise applications, or today the push is go to cloud. And when we talk about cloud, also it comes into the picture where we need to have a multi-cloud key management strategy in place, where if I move from one cloud service provider to the second cloud service provider, the key manager, the keys that I was using here should be available to me. Doesn't matter where I go. So that scalability and integration with third-party SaaS gateways or with the cloud service provider is also becomes one of the most important assets, one of the most important reasons to consider when you're thinking about a typical key manager. So what that means is a centralized and secure key manager evolves and it tries to protect your data, doesn't matter where it lives, by giving you the true sense of security, by giving you a peace of mind wherever data lives, giving you the sense that my keys are safe and they are protected, and I can use them and prove the access controls and everything else to my auditor next time when the auditor shows up, and I don't have to worry about the keys on who can access a key. Can I revoke the keys? Is there a centralized dashboard where I can see what's happening with my entire a cryptographic ecosystem, all of those answers will be immediately answered when your keys flow into a centralized and a single key manager. There is one thing on top of that I would like to add is I talked about backups. Think about the backup for a second. I talked about the USB drives, or I also still, I mean, we are in 2021 and we are still talking about tape backups because it is the cheapest and the best approach when we talk about offsite backups. So when we talk about offsite backups, if you take a step back through all of this entire ecosystem, we have got different defenses in place. We have our access control systems, we have our IDS systems, IPS systems, we have our DLPs, and so on. But the moment that data now is stored on, let's say, a tape, and now this tape, when it's going for an offsite storage, it becomes mobile. And what if that tape falls in wrong hands? All of these protection mechanisms, all of this security in depth that you have applied is not going to help you. So it is also important that data is encrypted when it comes to those backup solutions, because that was one thing that always fascinated me is my company gave me a laptop. They say that I must have BitLocker on and everything else. But now if I can copy that data on a regular USB drive, what is protecting me? Nothing. So it is also important that when we talk about those backups, when we talk about that file and folder level encryption is maintained end to end. Doesn't matter where the file goes. Mark, you want to add more on that?
No, that's great. I mean, that is the whole idea, you know, data at rest, whether it's on a backup system, tape drive, or your storage subsystem, or even your boot drive. All that is protected with this solution. And, you know, if we can go to the next slide, basically, uh, you know, we talked about this, the whole life cycle management and trying to have security all the way through. So I'm sure you have questions down your mind. Okay, great. Now my data at rest is protected. How about data at motion? When I have data leaving one server to go to another server within WAN or LAN. Well, that we have solution as well. And that's the beauty of it. That's why Utimaco plus HPE better together. We basically cover the data address, obviously today focus. We cover data at motion when you are transferring your data, and also data at execution. What happens when that data is fetched and being manipulated or number crunched in your CPU? Well, through our partners and a slew of solutions, we cover that as well. So basically, all the tenants of you know, data protection is included in the solution that we're talking about today. And you know, again, you know, you add that to your basically end-to-end full life cycle management, then you have a peace of mind that from get-go till that data is retired, your data is protected. And essentially what we're talking about is security by design. We are going above and beyond. On any design, we always think about the security angle to make sure if there are any attack surface exposed or added, those are covered and are being secured. So the whole goal is to have, the whole life cycle of your data being protected, and you're in charge so that if there is a tap into the system, they cannot tap into your data. Back to you, Manish.
Absolutely, and that makes total sense. That, as I said, information security is something that must be considered right from the design phase. It is not something that is a band-aid that you can put on top. And to wrap it up, when we talk about the data, when we talk about the servers, when we talk about all of these different assets, as you can see that a centralized key manager evolves. It provides many benefits to you. For example, we talk about tamper evident records or proof of compliance, streamlining the key management process that reduces cost, that reduces your attack surface, and protects your data when it comes to the adversary ecosystem, right at the moment where the malicious bodies try to capture the data. Even if that happens, the data is essentially worthless. So we are trying to reduce the risk. We are trying to reduce the human errors and trying to split the control across different entities to minimize the risk, removing the guesswork and allowing you to scale with the key management, with the servers, with the right storage assets as we make progress into the information security realm. With that, Jason, over to you.
All right, very good. Thank you, guys. Maybe a couple questions back for you guys. I know we've got roughly about 7 minutes left here. Again, just a reminder for the participants. If you do have a question, please go ahead and type that into the Q&A box. We'll make sure that we get it addressed. But I'll kick things off here. Is there any industry standard for key management? All right, and I'll leave it up to one of you guys.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. When it comes to key management, maybe I can take a step back. And back in good old days, every single entity who was trying to come up with encryption, everybody had their own key managers. And that resulted into a chaotic situation where there were 15 different key managers within my ecosystem that was managing 15 different assets. And that was never a true enterprise solution. So then industry came together and they coined a term called KMIP, which is a key management interoperability protocol. And that is the standard within the key management realm. I mean, think of it as TCP/IP. Today, when I buy a Wi-Fi router for my home, I don't have to think about that, whether it will work with my iPhone or whether it will work with my laptop or not. We know that it will work. And that's exactly the thought process when we designed KMIP is, it doesn't matter where you need key management, KMIP is the protocol of choice or should be the protocol of choice. And it is implemented across the board, independent of a vendor, independent of who encrypts your data. KMIP is the standard algorithm, the standard protocol that is used.
Very good. Thank you for that. Another question is, what happens if a storage drive goes bad? Do we lose the encrypted data?
Mark, you want to take that?
Sure, absolutely not. I mean, that's the whole point. We have, have security in our mind, and basically through this solution, you will not lose your data. And obviously, there are steps that you can go through to recover the data address. So Manesh, if you want to elaborate more on that.
Sure, absolutely. When it comes to that, if you happen to lose your hard drive, see, this is not something that, the way we designed our solutions is not something that pushes you into a territory where you feel uncomfortable or you want to learn a new skill set. The way we have designed all of these solutions that we are talking about is to make sure that you don't have to learn something new and you can continue your business the way you have been doing forever. So today, when you lose a hard drive, what you do is obviously you have RAID and those kind of things. So you yank out a old hard drive, throw it away, and then push in a new hard drive that takes care of the things. And the RAID will come in force and will take care of your rebuilding the data and so on. Even if now you have encryption enabled, you don't have to worry about it. One thing that I would like to add, maybe I'm taking a small tangent here, but when these hard drives fail and they're not encrypted, you have to go through some extensive steps in getting rid of the hard drive, maybe by shredding it to pieces. Whereas with encryption, what you can do when the data is encrypted, what you can do is you can simply go back to your key manager, erase the key that is meant for this failed hard drive, and now your data is considered unrecoverable. So you don't have to go through the extensive steps of shredding your hard drives, you can go and throw that hard drive into a recycle bin, and it can get recycled. So that way you can also be environment friendly and don't have to worry about spending money even on destroying the hard drives to protect your data.
Very good. Thank you for that. We do have a question from Alan Garcia. He said that regarding encryption, what would be the difference of multi-party computation, MPC, where the keys are never stored as a whole?
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. We talk about a lot of different ways how we can store the keys here. There are different technologies that come in where we are now talking about split keys, where the key is never stored in a whole. And now you have keys stored in two different, let's say, key managers that have what, let's say, a half and half of the key, and those two things has to come together, and then only the particular asset is being logged. End of the day, it all boils down to making sure that the asset that you're trying to protect, how autonomous you want that asset to be. We typically implement that within the HSM world, where we enforce a principle of 4 eyes, making sure that two entities has to come together to do a certain operation, or maybe to encrypt or decrypt certain assets. So it totally depends upon what you're trying to protect and how you are trying to, what kind of security would you like to employ there.
Very good. We got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to come back and give you guys an opportunity to maybe just give a quick solution or product overview relative to the things that do address the executive order and how they work together between both Utimaco and HPE.
Sure. So I can start. Basically, very good question. So essentially, the executive order or zero trust cadence, there are about 10 pillars or 10 areas of focal points. One of them is obviously the hardware and the supply chain, which obviously we talked to that. The other one is the capability to basically, the high level idea is don't trust and verify at every step. So, and then transmit minimal amount of data that you need. So, using the microservices and, microsegmentation for the data that gets transferred, all those are different cadences under the zero trust. So obviously from the hardware stack point of view, we are following those cadences. And, obviously once the software stack is staged, then we go to Utimaco, which I'll let Manish talk to that.
Right, and then everywhere, wherever we employ encryption, again the keys flow back in. And when we talk about these key management solutions, they also further back and can protect their keys into the HSMs as well, the hardware security modules, right, which is considered as the ultimate root of trust. So a single root of trust, a simple example could be, let's say we talk about cloud. We have an HSM, a hardware security module that can live on-prem. And now this on-prem hardware security module proves as root of trust when you have key management deployed across the different cloud vendors. And let's say there is a subpoena, or there is a potential attack or compromise at one of these cloud security providers, or one of these environments. What you can do is you can simply cut the umbilical cord in between the HSM, the root of trust, and this key manager, and all the data that is protected, all the keys that are there within this particular environment will be rendered useless, because nobody will be able to decrypt the keys that even lives on the key manager. So essentially, the key manager comes or emerges as a single point of, I would say, single pane of glass that gives you an entire picture of where your data lives, what it is used for, and what kind of security is being implemented for this particular data, while the solutions that Mark talked about protects your data and protects it throughout the ecosystem.
Very good. Thank you guys for that. Manish, I know you spent a lot of time and energy putting together the white paper, and I know you guys are going to get that published here shortly. Do you want to maybe mention some of the things that are on the
Sure.
screen, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are a couple of resources that are available for you. We have put in a white paper that talks about these things, but it goes even further about strengthening the information security assets using the right key management. What kind of key management one should use? We also talk about tokenization and those kind of things in that white paper. So I encourage you guys to take a look at it. It is available on the Utimaco website. And there is a short link that is also available there on the screen. There is also data at rest, basically a solution brief that we have put together along with HP that talks about the HP ProLine servers, that talk about the end-to-end HP assets wherever HP stores the data, how ESKM comes into the play and protects those assets. So I encourage you guys downloading and taking a look at it. And if there are any questions, be it about the key manager, be it about how HP stores and protects the data from throughout the entire ecosystem, please write us at hsm@utimaco.com or computesecurity@hpe.com. And we'll be more than happy to help you out if there is anything we can do to help you out.
Very good, gentlemen. Well, Mark and Menace, both thank you for the overview today. I thought it was very good. We'll also be publishing the contents of both this webinar as well as the white paper on the Secure Technology Alliance website as well. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Again, thank you, gentlemen, and good luck. Have a good weekend.